Hi, and welcome to the Legislative Academy, hosted by the North Los Angeles County Regional Center. During this training, you will learn about the importance of legislative advocacy for individuals with developmental disabilities and their families. Following this training, you will have the knowledge and skills to be a more involved and effective advocate, helping to ensure that our community can access the services and supports that allow them to live full and successful lives in their community. This training is presented by me, Michelle Hyde. I'm a legislative educator and a parent of a young man who became a client of the Regional Center at age 2. During my journey of parenting a child on the autism spectrum, I learned that many, if not all, of the services provided to him were funded by the federal and state governments. This means that both federal and California legislature and leadership are making decisions about which services are available and how these services will be provided for all individuals with developmental disabilities. During this training, you will learn how to be an effective advocate in your life and the lives of others served by the Regional Center system. If legislative leaders are making decisions about services for individuals with developmental disabilities, it is important for them to understand our community and hear from us about what is important in our lives. Since becoming a legislative educator, my goal is to educate others, including self-advocates, families, service providers, direct support professionals, and regional center staff, to be effective advocates in their own lives and to advocate at a higher level for the services and supports that are meaningful in our community. The Lanterman Act was initiated by families who wanted better for their children, and it will only be maintained if our community continues to advocate and be heard. Legislative leaders need to hear from our community to understand what is important in their lives. Self-advocates are the most important voice because they share what is important in their lives and how others can best support their wishes and help them meet their goals. As a family member, you are aware of how services and supports your loved one or your family receive. You have a valuable opinion and your voice should be heard. Service providers, as those providing the critical supports and services for individuals with developmental disabilities, you have an important role in our community. Quality service providers are a critical part of the system, and without them, individuals with developmental disabilities cannot live full lives in their community. Direct support professionals may be one of the most important parts of the system of supports for individuals with developmental disabilities. Self-advocates and their families rely on DSPs to provide the services needed to experience a high quality of life. Regional center staff are often the first ones that people call when they need help. They are the ones who meet with self-advocates and families to help make plans to support people and help them realize their dreams. Regional center staff are often intimately familiar with the issues faced by people in our community and how to best help them. We really need to ensure that legislators are hearing from our community when they're making decisions about our community. The Lanterman Developmental Disability Services Act, known as the Lanterman Act, created the community supports we have in California and is unique to California. The Lanterman Act is landmark legislation that was signed into law in 1969 by then California Governor Ronald Reagan. This is the California law that says people with developmental disabilities and their families have a right to get the services and supports they need to live like people without disabilities. The Lanterman Act outlines the rights of individuals with developmental disabilities and their families, how the regional centers and service providers can help these individuals, what services and supports they can obtain, how to use the individualized program plan to get needed services, and what to do when someone violates the Lanterman Act, and how to improve the system. The Lanterman Act was initiated by parents who wanted better for their children than a life of institutionalization and isolation. Prior to the Lanterman Act, parents were faced with supporting their children with no community services or sending them to a state institution. The Lanterman Act has stood as an example of good public policy for over 50 years, and today, both federal and state legislation impacts the services and supports our community receives through the regional center system. For more history of the Lanterman Act and how the regional center system was created, search for "We're Here to Speak for Justice" on YouTube. This hour-long documentary reviews the beginnings of the regional center system for people with developmental disabilities and their families in the state of California. I hope you are beginning to see the importance of legislation and advocacy as it relates to the services and supports provided for individuals with developmental disabilities and their families. State and federal legislation impacts those services, and state legislators make decisions about services for our community. Advocacy is really important to help legislators understand how services and supports help our community. Laws can come down to the federal government, to states, where states then implement these laws in the manner directed, or states can pass their own laws that impact only people living in that state. In California, services and supports for individuals with developmental disabilities are impacted by both federal and state legislation. County and city legislation or policy might also impact the lives of individuals with developmental disabilities. For example, accessibility and ADA compliance or transportation might be overseen by your county or city. Throughout California, IHSS and Medi-Cal is managed by counties, but direction for these programs comes from the state government. It can be a really confusing process, but there are many advocates throughout the state that understand the legislative process who are advocating for our community every day. The state of California is led by the governor, who sets the priorities for funding and legislation in the state in coordination with the Department of Finance. The California Health and Human Services Agency oversees the Department of Developmental Services, which oversees the 21 regional centers in the state. All of these entities have a responsibility for setting policy, regulation, and implementing laws related to supports and services for individuals with developmental disabilities and their families. The Developmental Services Task Force is a group of stakeholders who provide guidance on the delivery of services to Californians who have intellectual and developmental disabilities. In November 2018, the California Department of Developmental Services and the California Health and Human Services Agency reformed the DS Task Force. 157 individuals from across the state were selected as members of the Developmental Services Task Force, with 42 of those individuals serving on the task force and an additional 115 people serving on the task force's 5 work groups. These groups meet throughout the year and provide guidance to Health and Human Services and to DDS on policies, regulations, and laws related to the services and supports for individuals with developmental disabilities. The task force is made up of advocates, parents, family members, service providers, and other interested community members. Like I mentioned before, federal legislation sometimes trickles down to states, and then states decide how to implement these new laws. At times, laws are implemented the same across states, and other times states do things a little bit differently. At times, as long as states meet minimum requirements, they may be free to implement laws how they see fit for their state. States at times have to submit plans to the federal government for approval, and sometimes they do not have to go through this process. To be an informed and effective advocate, it is important to know who represents you and where you live. Each of us is represented by legislators at the federal and state level. At the federal level, each state has 2 United States senators who represent the entire state. States are divided into congressional districts with 1 representative from each district in the United States House of Representatives. To find your United States senators, you can go to www.senate.gov. You can then find the menu and select California from the drop-down menu or from the map of states to find the United States senators who represent the state of California. To find your member of the United States House of Representatives, go to www.house.gov. Find the area where you can type in your zip code, and the site will show you who represents you in the House of Representatives. At the state level, California is divided into 40 state Senate districts and 80 state assembly districts. Each Senate district is represented by a state senator, and each assembly district is represented by a state assembly member. Each person in California is represented by a senator and an assembly member. Senators and assembly members have both capital offices in Sacramento and district offices in their local area. Their addresses and phone numbers are available on the Senate and Assembly websites. To find your California representatives, go to findyourrep.legislature.ca.gov. To the legislators that represent you in the area you live in, you are a constituent. This is important because legislators listen to constituents more than people who live outside their district. If you meet a legislator, write a letter or call them, make sure to mention if you are a constituent. Legislative changes are made primarily through 3 different processes: the budget process, trailer bills, or regular bills. State legislation impacts the disability community in various ways. The Lanterman Act is revised to either better meet the needs of the community or at times to save state funding. Bills are passed through the bill process in California that impact individuals with developmental disabilities and their families. Trailer bills are passed to implement the state budget. We're now going to review each one. In California, the budget year goes from July 1st to June 30th, but the process for building the budget begins way before this date. The governor proposes a budget for the upcoming year on or before January 10th, and this budget must be balanced. A balanced budget is one where the estimated revenues meet or exceed the governor's proposed spending. Following the release of the governor's budget in January, budget subcommittees hold hearings in the Senate and the Assembly to discuss the governor's proposal. During hearings, the public can share their opinion on priorities for funding. During this time, it is important for legislators to hear from the developmental disability community on what impact the proposed budget has on their lives. The governor then releases a revision of the January budget. This is called the May revise and takes into account revised revenues, legislative feedback, and other factors. Following the May revised budget, hearings continue before the June 15th deadline for the legislature to pass a budget. The budget bill may be passed by a simple majority vote of each house of the legislature. Lawmakers face penalties if they fail to pass the budget bill on or before June 15th each year. Budget trailer bills trail the main budget bill, and this is why they are called trailer bills. They make changes needed to implement the budget. The process for trailer bills is different than regular bills. Trailer bills have impacted individuals with developmental disabilities over the years in both positive and negative ways. There are usually both a Senate and Assembly version of the trailer bill, but ultimately only one will pass on to the governor's desk for signature. Trailer bills also take effect immediately upon the governor's signature, whereas regular bills usually take effect January 1st of the following year. Trailer bills are something that need to be watched closely by informed advocates for the disability community due to the fast pace of the process. There is limited opportunity to review these bills, and there might be a variety of changes that impact our community. Reading bills can be complicated, and trailer bills are even more complicated than other bills, with a very limited time to provide input to lawmakers before they are voted on. The bill process in California is similar to the process at the federal level, but we're going to specifically review the bill process in California. You might remember the old Schoolhouse Rock video, "I'm Just a Bill," and this is very accurate. However, this reviews the federal steps, and we no longer type bills on a typewriter. The first step in the bill process is when an idea is proposed to a legislator, or they might have an idea themselves. The legislator becomes the bill author and introduces it in their house of the legislature. When a bill is introduced, it is assigned a number. If it is introduced in the Senate, it will be labeled SB and the number. If it is introduced in the Assembly, it will be labeled AB and the number. Once a bill is introduced, it gets assigned to committees who will hear the bill. A bill may be assigned to one committee or more, depending on the topic of the bill. For example, a bill about expanding transportation for individuals with disabilities might be assigned to the Transportation Committee, while a bill expanding regional center services might be assigned to the Committee on Human Services. If a bill passes out of its assigned committees, then it goes for a second and third reading in its house of origin. The house of origin is the house where the bill was introduced, either the Senate or the Assembly. The bill then has to repeat the entire process in the other house. Once it passes out of its house of origin, it has to repeat the process in the other house. If the bill goes through all these steps, then it will move to the governor's desk. Once a bill moves to the governor, they have 12 days to sign, approve without signing, or veto a bill. If a bill is signed or approved without signature, it goes to the Secretary of State to be chaptered, which is the final step for a bill. The Secretary of State assigns the chapter number, such as Chapter 123 Statutes of 2021. The bills are numbered consecutively in the order in which they were received. This slide shows an overview of the bill process in California. In California, there is a 2-year legislative process, meaning bills have 2 years to complete the process. The legislative cycle begins in odd numbered years when new bills are introduced. For example, a bill that is introduced in 2021 will have until the end of 2022 to complete the process of going through both houses of the legislature. You can have an impact during the bill process in a few different ways. You can call or write a letter to the author of the bill or your legislators sharing your opinion. You can attend a hearing and give your opinion during public comment, but this may be difficult for those living further away from Sacramento. You can also write letters to members of the committee who will be hearing the bill you are concerned about. There are ways to submit letters online or addresses where they can be sent. If you need help sharing your opinion about a bill, you should call your local legislator and ask for help. In California, And in almost every other state in the United States, the legislature is made up of two houses. In California, there is a Senate and an Assembly. In some other states, the two houses have other names, but in California, it's the Senate and the Assembly. There are 40 members of the Senate, which is sometimes called the upper house. Each senator represents about 1 million Californians. There are 80 members of the Assembly, and each of them represent about 500,000 Californians. Like we learned earlier, each person living in California is represented by a senator and assembly member. Senators serve 4-year terms, and assembly members serve 2-year terms. A proposition passed in 2012 limited the time a person may serve in the California legislature to a lifetime maximum of 12 years. Most of the time, we focus on federal politics, such as the President of the United States, Senate, and House. But in California, the legislature, including the Senate and the Assembly, have more impact on the lives of individuals with developmental disabilities than the federal government. The federal government does have an impact, but the California legislature makes decisions about many of the services and supports that individuals with developmental disabilities and their families receive. The Lanterman Act is a California law that can only be changed by lawmakers in California. A fun piece of information about the California legislature is that the Senate and Assembly are color-coded. Like you see in the pictures, everything in the Senate is red and everything in the Assembly is green, from the decor to the floor color to the color on the TV when hearings are televised. The main building where senators and assembly members' offices are is separated with the Senate on one side and the Assembly on the other. The floors on the Senate side are tinted red, and the floors on the Assembly side are tinted green. Even the carpets in the elevators are colored either red or green, as are some benches in the Capitol building. This is a picture of one of the main hearing rooms where bill and budget hearings take place. This is one of the large hearing rooms. There are 2 large hearing rooms in the Capitol building, one on the Assembly side and one on the Senate side. There are also smaller hearing rooms throughout the Capitol building where smaller hearings are held. When you attend a hearing, you would be sitting in the audience at the bottom of the picture. The senators or assembly members sit at the large curved desk seating area, and the table in the middle is for people giving testimony on the bill. These might be experts on the topic of a bill, the author of the bill, Department of Finance, or others sharing information about the bill. During a hearing, members of the public are often given an opportunity to give public comment, usually at the end of the bill testimony or at the end of a section of a hearing. To give public comment, there's a location identified where you can stand or line up to give comment. Depending on the length of the hearing, the chair of the hearing may tell members of the public to state only their name and if they are in favor or opposed to the bill. They might give 1 to 2 minutes per person to give your opinion of the bill and how it will impact your life. To make an impact in legislation and policymaking for our community, it is important to get the community engaged, encourage participation, and identify issues of importance to our community. These are important things for all members of our community: self-advocates, families, service providers, direct support professionals, regional center staff, and other community members. One of the most important things to do is listen to our community to find out what is really important in their lives. When we listen to our community, we hear about issues that are important in the lives of people with developmental disabilities and their families. We hear things like transportation and the ability to get places they want to go, safety and security to be safe in their homes and communities, affordable housing to be able to live in the community of their choice, independence to be as independent as possible in their life. Self-advocacy, to advocate for what is important to them. Employment, to have meaningful work and a paycheck. Quality services to be provided by caring and supported direct support professionals. Social and leisure activities to have full and meaningful lives. Voting, to have their voice heard and be counted. ADA compliance, to be able to get around their community with ease. SSI benefits that help them live a quality life. Healthcare, and so much more. Listening informs advocacy work so that the focus is on issues important to the community. Advocates can then share this information with elected officials and work towards meaningful change. Elected officials who make policy decisions and laws that impact the lives of individuals with developmental disabilities need to hear from our community. They need to hear from us to understand our lives. They need to know what is important to our community. In order for elected officials to support what's important to us, we need to build relationships with them. This helps them understand our lives. To build meaningful relationships, we need to share our stories, make connections with them by getting to know them and letting them get to know you and your family. This can be hard because some people don't like sharing about their lives, but legislators need to get to know us so that when they are making policies that impact our community, they will think about the impact these policies have on the real lives of people they represent. These pictures are of a young man with autism and California legislator Scott Wilk. This young man met with his assembly member and shared about his life and the services and supports that help him. Later, Scott Wilk became a senator in the California legislature, and their relationship continued. A relationship is built through many connections. How will you start making the connections with those who represent you? You can make a call or attend a community event and share with them what is important in your life. You can follow them and message them on social media. You can subscribe to their newsletters. This is important for advocacy work, but also to get important updates about things happening in your neighborhood. You can also write them letters sharing about your life, things important to you, and asking for their support. This slide has a picture of a self-advocate meeting with Senator Anthony Portantino. Senator Portantino is showing him the gargoyles in the ceiling of the assembly chamber. This is a fun thing to see when you're in the Capitol building in Sacramento, but they're really hard to find unless someone points them out for you. And Senator Portantino really enjoys making these connections with people from his community. For effective advocacy, we need to target those who are making decisions that impact our lives. We need to know who they are, find opportunities to connect with them, ask them for their support, and let them get to know you and your family. You are taking an important step to become an effective advocate by educating yourself about the system. Now you can begin to research engagement opportunities to learn more or to engage with legislators and other important people in the community. Networking is an important part of advocacy. Once you begin to be an effective advocate, you can inspire and engage others to do the same. Our community needs to continue to advocate to maintain the Lanterman Act and the services and supports that individuals with developmental disabilities need to live full and independent lives in their communities. This is really hard work, but we need to be determined to continue the advocacy because without advocacy, our system could stop existing. Effective legislative advocacy requires education, empowerment, and taking action to make meaningful change. Here are some actions that you can take to begin advocacy efforts and make meaningful change in our community. You can thank state legislators for their support for our community and remind them about the importance of the services for you and your family. You can then continue the advocacy work by continuing to be engaged and learn more about legislative advocacy. Never doubt that a small group of concerned citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. This quote from Margaret Mead is a perfect example of the importance of legislative advocacy and taking action in our community. We as a small group can get involved, educated, and empowered to create meaningful change for our community. We can take our small group of concerned citizens and begin sharing information with others. By doing this, we can create more and more people who are informed advocates for our community. Through this larger group, real change can be made that will positively impact the lives of individuals with developmental disabilities. There are many resources to help as you continue to become an effective advocate. Here are just a few that you can use to continue to learn or stay up to date on what is happening in our community. Many of these also have newsletters that you can receive to stay up to date on information impacting our community. On behalf of the North Los Angeles County Regional Center, thank you for attending this training. I hope that you were able to learn a lot and are on your way to becoming an effective advocate in your life and the lives of others impacted by developmental disabilities. Please complete the survey link found below to share information about this training and improve future educational offerings. Thank you so much.